Thanks for joining us today. It's my neighbor and I again, David Weir, and we're going to be talking from Catholic and the Atheist. I'm the atheist, he's the Catholic, and I'm the liberal and he's conservative. So today we're going to get off religion and we're going to just take a look at economics. And I'll just start off by asking you a question.
All right, I'll start off by answering your question.
Giving me the correct answer.
I hope I'll give you an answer. It may not be correct.
So in 1929, when the stock market crashed, the prevailing conservative attitude about the best way out of that hole was what?
Well, it's to sort of hunker down, tighten your belts, lower government spending, and wait it out. And that was it's a good answer. It works, but the price you pay for it is too high. Too high a price. It's a Pyrrhic victory, because the price is essentially the extinguishment of the middle and lower classes.
And as we know, Hoover, who promoted the conservative point of view, was roundly defeated.
Yes.
It was the biggest defeat ever in the Electoral College. Over 500 electoral votes went to FDR.
Yeah.
And FDR was promoting a government spending program to create jobs. Mm-hmm. And as we know, once he did that, the economy suddenly surged upward. Almost immediately after the alphabet soup legislation was passed,
right,
the economy began to roar back. And then Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had an inclination to be more conservative fiscally because of his background, decided that in 1937 that he would back off of the public works programs because he thought the economy had recovered enough, and he was wrong. As soon as that happened in 37, the economy then took another crash.
Yeah.
And so he reinstated the public work program, and from then on, at that point, World War II was beginning to cause a lot more spending. So what we learned, or what I think we learned, was that in a quagmire, massive, and this was massive, this hugely created more government debt. In that situation, massive public investment in infrastructure and jobs was the answer, and we know it worked. We know it worked because it was an amazing transformation. And then, to add insult to injury, the war came along and we had to invest massively in the war. Massively in the war. So
that's what really pulled us out of the Depression.
So,
World War II.
Some people say that, but not everybody says that.
Of course not.
So what is your take on that whole period? I mean, it seems to me the lesson that we should have learned was that when you're in a quagmire, you should spend massively, bring the economy back, and not just stand back, tighten your belts, and say, okay, us in the stock markets we're going to do better now. You middle class people who don't have jobs, you're just going to have to tighten your belts.
Right. I think that was a hangover from the late Victorian period with the people like the Vanderbilts and the Astors and the profiteers.
You're talking about the Gilded Age.
Gilded Age, yeah. So part of that was a hangover from that. And as a Catholic, I would say any form of government which is Christ-centered, where a group of people decide to do X, Y, Z, and everyone in the group decides to do it, and it's morally sound and civilly probate, that's fine. It was a terrible, terrible time. I remember my father talking about having mashed potato sandwiches for lunch and for dinner 3 or 4 days a week. Grow your own vegetables. It was a tough time. Even the miners had to pay for their own coal.
And I know from talking to you, because one of the elements that really saved America from the Gilded Age, as you just mentioned, from the late 1800s, was unions, unionization.
Absolutely.
And you're very much, even though you're conservative, you're very pro-union.
Absolutely, totally pro-union, because the working man needs someone to represent him. The corporate CEO has X number of lawyers to represent his interests and the financial backing to do it, but the working man has no one to do it for him. So organizing and representing himself in a union is is essential to balance the scale.
So fast forward to post World War II, immediately following World War II.
Yeah.
And once again, you've got conservatives singing the same old song. World War II is over, and Germany needs to be fixed, and Japan needs to be fixed,
Yeah.
and America needs to be fixed, and we got a lot of rebuilding to do. And the conservatives said, oh, we can't afford to lend money to Europe, and they were against the Marshall Plan.
Yeah, they were. There was
The Marshall Plan proved to be one of the smartest investments America ever made.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We made Europe into our customers for many, many years.
Well, that's the other thing, because we were the only person left standing with a operational industry base. Every other one was destroyed in the world, but that was eliminated in the past decade or so, 2 decades.
And then
It's more balanced now.
And then after Truman, along came Eisenhower, and it's amazing to me that you could even say that he was remotely Republican, because Eisenhower was probably the most pro-union and pro-spending president we ever had. And when I say spending, of course I mean the huge interstate system that was built.
Exactly.
He realized after seeing the Autobahn that he had to do something
Yeah.
about being able to make America mobile in the event of war.
And also part of that, Rod, was it was designed so that bombers could land on it
Exactly.
and planes could take off from it. Be a secondary defense system. Exactly.
And they have to this day in emergencies landed on the
You see that on YouTube. Yeah, exactly. So he represents a good balance between the military mind and the civilian mind. Matter of fact, he invented the term the military-industrial complex.
He warned us all about that.
He did. And that's another issue that we can address some other time.
But once again, we were in a position where conservatives were saying tighten your belts, and liberals were saying no, spend, spend, spend. And it's funny to me that we're us liberals are always characterized as being tax and spend. When we say spend, what we mean is instead of spending money on taxes that just end up going right back to the rich, tax breaks that go right back to the rich, we spend money on infrastructure and jobs for the middle class, and therefore the economy grows from the ground up. So the whole idea that raising taxes would somehow magically make the economy better was tested during Ronald Reagan. And as you know, he quadrupled the national debt, spending massively on spending. And that was the beginning of what we call the vulture curve. When instead of the internet, the stock market going up and down and the labor market going up and down, the stock market did this and the labor market did that.
Yeah.
And that's because of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan wanted everybody to understand that government bad, business good. Right?
Well, by and large, I agree with that. Yeah. The less the government is involved in your life, the happier you will be and the more money you will have. That's for sure. So everything else being equal, I would be opposed to government spending.
But you were in favor of the Reagan tax cuts. That's government spending.
Well, actually, that's a reduction in spending, because the idea was to have less money coming in, but stimulate the economy.
Didn't work. It quadrupled the debt.
It did.
And the middle class was doing this.
Absolutely.
So it only helped the rich. Ronald Reagan helped the rich, and he famously destroyed unions.
Oh, remember the flight controllers?
Oh, God, yes.
And he was right to do that. Because
Reagan was right to break the strike.
Right.
Against your own brothers that you...
Well, they violated the law. Legally, they shouldn't have done that. It was illegal for them to do that.
Well, they were not getting the raises they needed in order to continue.
Well, then they negotiate or go somewhere else to work.
Well,
what they did was illegal. So you either uphold the law or you don't.
You can make that statement about everything unions have ever done. This was illegal, that was illegal. The goons that went and attacked them because they were having illegal strikes and they were assembling illegally. There's always, the upper class always uses the law to put their heel down on the working man.
Yeah, it happened to my grandfather. And 2 of my grandfathers, I know from personal experience and from having them tell me that. But generally speaking, if you're going to have an ordered, structured society, you have to obey the law, and the law has to be enforced. Now, you can change the law if you don't like it, or modify it, but
If you're in power, you can change the law. If you're not in power, you cannot. Point out to me why liberals are wrong about the way they approach it. In fact, how about this last go around of all this spending that Biden has done? Tell me what you think about that.
it's horrible. That's what's causing the inflation we're experiencing right now.
Oh, so COVID didn't cause inflation. Is that what you're saying?
I really don't have the figures in front of me right now about inflation before and after Biden, but I do know the gas was a lot cheaper. It was like $1.60, $1.70 a gallon.
And you don't recognize that was caused by Ukraine?
Oh, this is before Ukraine.
Oh, the gas prices
Yeah.
started rising before Ukraine.
No, it was lower before Biden and Ukraine.
Okay, I'll have to look that up
Me
because
too.
as I recall, it didn't become disaster until Ukraine hit in February of 2022.
Started right after Biden took office. Remember, especially with those cyber attacks on oil pipelines.
Well,
and
and
things.
don't forget that once again, as we came out of COVID and people started working again, the demand went from way down here where nobody is getting in their cars to way up here.
That's
so
true.
what happens when demand gets high? Inflation.
Well, actually, it came from having all those billions of dollars floating around the economy.
Well,
Once you have excess dollars floating around, you're going to have an increase in inflation.
excess dollars.
Right. Because it wasn't based on production or services.
It was based on need.
Government fiat.
But it was based on the need. You know, you're talking about people who were in dire straits and were going to the hospital and were dying, and people were having to stay home because of the rule that said you have to stay home. So you're saying in those emergency situations that government shouldn't say, okay, we're going to put out some money so that people can just live. And by the way, the amount of money that our government put out was peanuts compared to what Europe put out to help their people through the pandemic.
Oh, it's a good thing to give people aid when they need it. And that's why we should have savings, our government should have savings set aside for emergency situations. But for the government to print money not based on some objective standard is wrong. Because that would be self-inflationary.
I don't see how you can say that it was without a standard. We knew that these people needed relief, and we gave them relief.
I agree, and we should have done it. I don't disagree with that. But we should have had savings to cover that.
But that was inflationary.
Not savings.
Wait a minute, we didn't have savings to cover that.
We didn't have any savings.
Right.
Exactly, that's the problem. So the government should have a rainy day fund set aside for things like that.
We don't ever have rainy day funds set aside. There's never any extra money.
Well, that's the problem. We need it.
We raise taxes so that we can get the debt under control, and then Republicans get in and they give all the money back to the people, and the people that are highly productive are not contributing to the welfare and the well-being of laborers. Mm-hmm. They're giving all of the profits. In fact, what they largely did during the last tax break, the Trump tax break, was to buy back their own stocks to raise their prices for their stocks. That was what happened.
Yeah.
How the hell does that help anybody but the rich?
Well, that's a whole other issue we can talk about that I probably tend to agree with you on the people making money off making money and moving money around, not directly
That's
linked
what Trump was all about.
Goods and services. Well, what he did was not illegal with that.
I didn't say it was illegal.
Well, that's the part of the issue too. So you can't criticize a man for doing something that's not illegal.
I'm not talking about what's legal and what's not legal. I'm talking about public policy. His public policy was disastrous for the economy.
I totally disagree. Just look at what the gas price was back then, or what the government debt was, or the employment situation
He caused a $2 trillion increase, not just in debt, but in the deficit.
That's true, but it carried on a long tradition. It wasn't just him. It's hard to...
And because of Biden's programs, we have decreased the deficit. You do realize that? It was, and it is because of the massive
We
spending,
decreased the rate of expansion of the debt.
and because of the massive spending on infrastructure,
But-
it revived the economy.
But the other thing with Trump, the rate of employment and income for minorities and people of color was the greatest it's ever been.
I've heard that statistic.
It's a fact.
Okay.
They've had more employment opportunities, they were fully employed, had more money than ever before. Same with blacks.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I don't personally like the man. He's sort of boorish, but if you look at what he's done, what he's accomplished, it's substantial, especially for the middle and lower classes.
I totally disagree with you.
Of course.
If you're taking $2 trillion of government of money that would be income coming into government to pay back debt, instead give that back to the very people who are the richest Americans. And I think 85% of that went to the richest Americans, and they bought back their own stock. And if you say that somehow helps the economy, it does
Let me back you up a
not.
little bit. Just what are we talking about here?
Well, Trump's economy. It was
Okay.
based on that $2 trillion give back. That's what it was based on.